Good morning, grandkids. Today I will be reading you another episode, chapter 7, from the book that I'm writing about Dorkly the young wizard. Um, so let's start reading chapter 7. Dorkly wandered the streets, looking in the shops, checking out the people, but kept heading toward the more sinister byways of Longport. He had gotten up this morning looking forward to today's business, hoping he could get back to the palace by nightfall. He had put his wizard robe in his closet and had searched through what he kept in there for outings like this, away from home. He had picked out dark trousers, which he tucked into his soft leather footwear. He had donned a white shirt with sleeves, long, full sleeves, gathered at the wristband. He left the neck open with ties hanging loose and the shirt hanging loose, but he had placed a red waistband around it, letting the shirt blouse out a little around the top of it. He had slapped a red tam on his head and felt quite ready for the day. His hair was a really dark brown and long, which was picking up lights from the sun as he walked the streets, whistling a tune and winking at the girls. Most often they would smile and wink back, causing him to turn and walk backwards as he kept an eye on them for a bit and ran into people. He was a cute young man, big brown eyes, always a hint of a smile, and a dimple in one cheek. But enough about his looks. Dorkly was a young man who desperately wanted adventure and was always on the lookout for something exciting to happen. Who knew what today's adventure might set in motion? He strolled into a shop which was actually selling ladies' products, perfume, curlers, makeup, and so on. The shopkeeper smiled and asked what she could help him with. I'd like to buy a packet of small cloth squares that ladies use to test little spreads of makeup on. My sister asked me to pick up some for her while I'm out, he said as he looked around a little embarrassed to be in here. Of course, she said as she handed him what he wanted. He dropped some coins into her hand and scurried back out of there. He dropped the little packet into a deep pocket in his trousers where he had a little bottle of potion. He wasn't selling that bottle to anyone. He would put a drop on a small square for them to test and see if they wanted any. If they did, he would sell them 2 squares with 1 drop on each. He didn't think they could get into too much trouble with such a limited amount. Hopefully. He came out of the shop and hurried on down the street. He saw a well-dressed man leaning back against a building, his foot propped up on the wall behind him. He had dark, almost black hair and a mustache, his hands in his pockets and chewing on a little twig. Dorkly stopped as he was passing by and said, "Hi, I've seen you up at the palace from time to time, haven't I?" The young man dropped his foot and stood up straight, taking the stick out of his mouth. "Yeah, I've been up there. Been trying to get the king's daughter interested, but I don't seem to be getting anywhere," he said with a laugh. "She does seem to be interested only in her own pursuits. I'd keep trying, though, if I was you," Dorkly grinned. "You never know." The young man stuck the stick back in his mouth and started chewing on it again, leaning back against the wall behind him. Dorkly asked, "What are you doing with that stick?" "Chewing on it." "Why?" It's supposed to help keep your teeth clean. I don't think that's working, Dorkly said as he walked on. Then he glanced back. The guy had taken the stick out, looking at it, then dropped it. He whipped his handkerchief out of his breast pocket and started rubbing at his teeth. Dorkly turned back around and kept on going, chuckling. He loved coming to Longport. He started whistling on his way again. As Dorkly entered the poorest section of Longport, he ducked down a narrow street to a small shop of men's goods and entered. They seemed to sell a few bits of everything that a man might want to pick up. A few bits of clothing on a rack, a table with a few bits of fabric stacked on it to take to a tailor. There was some armor, fighting gear, and a few bits of small equipment for farms, like scythes and hoes and so on. In the back was a counter with a cash box sitting on one end. The youngster he had come to see, about his same age, was standing behind the counter. They were casual friends that only saw each other once in a while, didn't run around together or know much about one another. But his name was Glover, and Dorkly knew that, and that he worked here. He also knew that the kid was called Glover because he wore only one glove to cover a hand which was burned and scarred. But he had never told Glover much about himself. The young man didn't know that Dorkly was a wizard from the palace. Dorkly walked up to the counter and said, "Hey, Glover, how you doing? Don't look like it's too busy in here today." "Yeah, not much business comes back to these streets. What you doing here?" "Came to show you something. Thought I'd let you try a sample and see if you wanted to buy a couple," Dorkly said, pulling out his small bottle of the potion for seeing, with a drop of this on a small cloth worn somewhere on you in front of whoever you wanted to spy on. You can see in your mind what they are thinking about and what they might be hiding in their clothing if they're trying to steal something from you. Want to try it?" "Sure," Glover said enthusiastically. Dorkly unstoppered the potion and dipped the little glass tube from inside against one of the small squares of cloth. Handing it to Glover, he said, "Now, I'm not selling the bottled potion, just a couple of these squares with a drop on each one. Each will last about 5 minutes. Here, take this sample and go spy on someone," he said with a chuckle. "This isn't a joke, is it?" "No. Who in here would you like to spy on?" Dorkly handed him the piece of enchanted cloth, and Glover looked around for a second and saw a man sort of inching his way toward the door. "Him!" Glover snatched the cloth and headed over to the man, who had stopped and looked back at him. Glover got in front of him, between him and the door, with the end of the enchanted cloth tucked in his belt, and said, "Hi, Mr. Berkeley. Nice day today, right? Finding anything that strikes your fancy?" In the meantime, Dorkly had sauntered past them and had stopped near the door, looking at a pair of boots. Glover, as soon as the square was in front of the man, almost gave himself away. He could see that the man was thinking, "Does he know I lifted that box of darts and that nice neck scarf? Are they making a bulge in my pocket? Is his friend there guarding the door? What's going on? Glover was amazed. This potion was priceless. Wow. Have a good day, he said, and walked over to Dorkly. You want them boots? Nah, just looking. They both meandered back toward the counter, and Mr. Berkeley quickly headed out the door. Man, Glover almost shouted, this stuff is golden. That man had 2 items stashed in his pockets. This is amazing. Why did you let him leave? Well, didn't matter right now. I was more in a hurry to get back to you and buy some of this stuff. He was so excited he was practically jumping around. This would be great to use in here. Well, don't be getting careless with it, Dorkly said. He sold him a packet of 3 claws, saturated a little more generously, took a handful of gold from him, and gave him a salute as he turned toward the door. Take care, Glover, he said as he headed out. Sure, Glover waved, and thanks. Dorkly hurried back through town to the stables. It was approaching evening, and he had a long ride ahead of him. He went to the front of the stables, patted Cheesy on his soft nose. He took a lump of cheese out of his pocket, held it out in front of Cheesy, who quickly folded his lips over it, taking it into his mouth and kind of prancing with joy. Dorkly laughed, hopping onto his back, and off they went. They galloped as it was getting late, with the sun starting to sink below the horizon. Dorkly finally realized that he hadn't stopped at his room and changed back into his wizard robe. Oh well, there was more at the house. It was getting chilly, and he pulled a dark cloak out of his saddle, throwing it on and tying a rope around it. This should get him through the palace back to his rooms in his tower. This had been an enjoyable and profitable day, just so Glover didn't overdo it or get caught using that potion. He rode on through the early evening, hoping to be home soon and have a meal and get in bed. He was just starting to feel the weariness from his long and busy day. He started to wonder about his dad. What was he like when he was young? Was he happy back then? Did he get in trouble, chase the girls? He laughed out loud. Something to tuck away in his brain with all the other things of interest in there. And he rode on with a happy smile and pleasant thoughts. So this is the end of our young wizard Dorkly, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you again next Friday, and we will read the next chapter. Goodbye, grandkids.